Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Search Sessions is a bi-weekly show we're hosting during the COVID-19 pandemic to help businesses and our community best position themselves for success during and after the crisis. We host this every other Wednesday at 11 a.m. Mountain and bring on industry experts and thought leaders to provide business advice and guidance during these times. Every week, our brilliant SEO leaders here at Boostability also provide weekly SEO advice and tips for how you can optimize your SEO. This week, we are discussing the customer mindset during COVID-19. We'll be exploring the different stages customers have been going through during the pandemic in order to understand them so that you can future-proof your business. This week, we have an incredible panel of marketing experts, including Mark Fisk, Marketing Operating Partner at HIG Capital, Anna Bessie, Director of Consumer Marketing at OpenTable, Kiara Kempsky, Senior Director of Brand Media and Global Programming at Ancestry, and Britt Bingham, VP of Marketing at Guru. And I'm Amanda Price, VP of Marketing here at Boostability and your host. So let's get started. In today's agenda, we are going to start with introductions of our expert marketing panel. We're then going to discuss the 3 stages of the COVID customer, hear from our expert marketing panel on the changing customers' needs, behaviors, and use cases, and then dive into a discussion around the changing customer and how to future-proof your business. We're then going to jump into actionable SEO strategies from Boostability and a live Q&A with the audience. If you guys have any questions during the discussion, please drop them into the Q&A section at the bottom, and Christine Pratt, our show producer, will organize them and we will go through them at the end. And then tune in next time for social media strategies on the top 5 ways to promote your brand on social media with Vivial. All right, let's jump in. So again, thanks everyone for being here. Boostability is the global leader in small business and partner-focused white label SEO. We offer affordable SEO specifically designed to meet the needs of small to medium-sized businesses. Our proprietary technology platform, Launchpad, tracks over 2.3 million keyword rankings per month, which enables us to make SEO decisions based on millions of bits of information. Not only that, but we serve customers and partners all around the world. We're in 15 countries, 9 languages, and are quickly expanding across the globe. We get 86% of our customers on the first page of Google in 6 months and got 69,000 keywords on page 1 in 2019. Boostability is dedicated to helping businesses succeed online. Well, we are thrilled to have Mark Fisk from HIG Capital here today. Mark Fisk is a marketing operating partner at HIG Capital, a private equity firm with $37 billion in assets under management. Previously, he served as VP of Marketing for Credit Karma, VP of Global Marketing for Ancestry.com, and Director of Marketing for Gap. From startups to Fortune 500 companies, Mark has scaled marketing teams across acquisition, lifecycle, monetization, brand, and UX. Mark, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
We're thrilled to have you here. HIG is a leading global private equity firm that aligns themselves with committed management and entrepreneurs to help build businesses of significant value. The HIG family of funds includes private equity, growth equity, real estate, debt, credit, lending, and biohealth. And for our next guests, we have Anna Bessie, the Director of Consumer Marketing at OpenTable, the restaurant reservation platform, focusing on brand marketing and content strategy. Previously, she worked in brand innovation at Kraft Heinz after receiving her MBA from the Kellogg School of Management. Anna has also led performance marketing teams focused primarily on paid search, both in-house and at agency. Anna, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Amanda.
And OpenTable is the world's leading provider of online restaurant reservations with over 60,000 restaurants globally using its software and millions of customers using it as well. And for our next guest, we have Kiara Kempsky, the Senior Director of Brand Media and Global Programming for Ancestry. Kiara oversees media strategy, investment, and measurement for Ancestry's largest acquisition channels. In this role, she pioneered the development of a global branded content engine, leading to Emmy-nominated TV series, Cannes Lion-winning films shaping the family history category, and Ancestry's billion-dollar subscription business. Chiara began her career in the nonprofit world, focusing on museum development, and then quickly pivoted to fast growth Bay Area fintech startups, building her background in growth marketing. Chiara, it's a pleasure to have you here today. And Ancestry is the global leader in family history, consumer genomics, and empowers journeys of personal discovery to enrich lives. All right, and we have Brittany Bingham, the VP of Marketing at Guru, a collaborative knowledge management solution where answers find you everywhere, every time. Previously, Brittany worked as VP of Marketing and Growth at RaiseMe, a social enterprise focused on expanding access to higher education, and is a Senior Director of Growth Marketing at SurveyMonkey, where she oversaw acquisition, conversion, engagement, and retention. She's also a regular contributor and speaker for Reforge, industry conferences, and popular growth podcasts. Britt, thank you so much for joining us.
Excited to be here.
And Guru is a collaborative knowledge management solution where answers find you. Guru connects teams and people and surfaces the right information to teams at the right time to help companies deliver customer experiences. It also improves team collaboration and productivity. All right, so to set the stage for our discussion today, we're going to take a look at the 3 stages of the customer mindset during COVID-19. When coronavirus hit, customers went through an immediate adapt stage, triggered by shelter-in-place orders and rapidly changing information about COVID-19. Their lives were altered overnight, resulting in an immediate change to previous day-to-day activities. In isolation, communication changed and needs changed. Things like masks and hand sanitizer and groceries became essential purchases. The restaurant industry had to undergo immediate transformation. We saw the rise in hobbies as people began to focus inward and at home. And we also saw use cases change for how businesses and consumers needed access to information. In months 2 and 3, customers began settling into what we now call the new normal. Many have adjusted to working from home and to using new technology like Zoom and Facebook groups to communicate. Consumer spending has begun to rise, with some industries seeing a 200% growth in sales year over year. And market opportunities have begun to emerge as customer behaviors and priorities shifted to living in a new environment. As America and the world slowly reopen commerce, we're entering a new stage, a stage where customers are more comfortable living in a corona world. They have become a bit more desensitized and are eager for the country and the world to reopen safely. And as the world does reopen, it's important to anticipate how your customers' needs have and will be changed in this environment. Will customers demand new things from you? How might your business and marketing strategies need to adapt to serve this new customer's priorities? And are the customers you serve during coronavirus here with you for the long haul or just temporary? And how do you future-proof your business? We're going to address these questions in the discussion to come, so let's jump in. Anna, looking back at the past 4 months, how have OpenTable customers' needs changed during COVID-19?
Yeah, so I think for OpenTable, one thing to keep in mind is we're a marketplace model. So we have both our restaurant customers who actually are paying customers using our service, and obviously consumers that are making reservations. So even like taking a step back before their needs changed, being a business that has so much data, we have 60,000 restaurants that are, small businesses that are very ingrained into local communities. We were seeing this change happen like real time, very rapidly. So I'm sure everybody remembers in the beginning of March where things were kind of unknown. We were starting to see in Seattle, reservations were dropping 35% year over year. Then they dropped 50% year over year. Then they dropped 90% year over year. And we started seeing that happen, city after city until eventually, obviously, there was the widespread shelter in place. So pretty early on, we made the decision as a company to actually release this data publicly. So it's in our State of the Industry report. And it was really, twofold. One, restaurants were really curious, like, what's happening? Like, is this just happening in my city? Is this just happening to me? So it let them see, like, this is actually happening, in your entire city and beyond. And it also actually provided really great information and economic indicators for the economy at large. So we are continuing to update this data. It's pretty interesting to check out. It's been quoted from economists, all the way up to used in the the White House press briefing a couple weeks ago to start to show early signs of recovery. But we knew that information was just something that we could show that goes beyond just its large businesses and really show the impact to like the small local businesses at scale. So with that, obviously we got to negative 100% reservations year over year, which essentially meant that, it was essentially meant restaurants were shut down. I mean, they were unable to operate in the normal capacity. They couldn't have diners come in. And so, I mean, for their needs, like they had to completely pivot the idea of what their business model even was.
Right.
And then for diners, diners were used to going into restaurants, making reservations. Like there was absolutely no need for a reservation. There was nowhere to go. So sort of the crux of what our business was, both for restaurants and diners, didn't really exist in the beginning of coronavirus, and really led to restaurants needing to pivot their business models. So, I mean, as you were talking about with the adapt stage, I mean, I touched on it briefly, but like first people needed information. So we got out the state of the industry, but the next was how do we support restaurants through this pivot in business model? So we really saw restaurants go in a couple of ways. Either they shut down just because obviously the paying of staff and rent and bills, like a lot of times it just wasn't feasible to operate. But then we saw many pivoting to takeout and delivery. Prior to coronavirus, we had 3,000 restaurants on our network that were offering takeout and delivery. Currently, we have 30,000. So this was
amazing.
It was a huge shift very quickly.
It also shows the resilience of small businesses during this time to pivot so quickly. And it's phenomenal to have a platform like OpenTable that enables them to communicate with their customers so that people know if they're open, if they can do curbside. You guys did a bunch of that to help them as well.
Yes, so definitely. So we saw people pivoting to that. We also saw diners. We did some diner research, and there was like a 70% uptick in the number of our diners that were that were switching to ordering takeout one time or more per week. So like, we realized that this was what we needed to really focus on to help restaurants succeed. So within our product, we already had delivery capability, but we really started focusing on that much more heavily. Obviously, that was reservations that are always been the primary part of our business. But if you log into our app or go to our website product right now, you'll see delivery is up top. We've created a takeout product. So essentially allowing restaurants to showcase what they were doing for takeout and also letting diners call them directly from our app. So that we hadn't had before. And it's an area that's really, I think, been taking off across the industry. I know I'm in Chicago and I've been getting so many interesting takeout options of like family meals or, takeout cocktails. Like restaurants are really doing interesting things to make takeout feel more special and elevated, especially with so many people stuck at home and really sick of their own cooking.
Yes.
And one other thing I think to touch on too that restaurants started doing that was interesting is obviously they still had their suppliers as well. So like farmers and getting meat and produce, and a lot of restaurants actually pivoted to a grocery store model or a market model where you could get like a farm box or grocery delivery. And so we saw that coupled with also what was happening at main grocery retailers where people were waiting in line, people were nervous to go to the grocery, and actually offered a product where you could reserve a shopping time for a grocery store. Both our restaurants turned to grocery, but also traditional grocery stores.
You can do that through OpenTable?
Yes. So if you go to opentable.com/grocery, you can see if there's any available in your area. It's definitely skews a bit more to larger cities where this was a larger need, but we still offer this completely for free for any grocery that needs help, with crowd management, making people feel safe, knowing who's in their store. And so all of that happened very quickly.
We have one of the people who works on my team as a family member at a restaurant here that provided really high-end meat, right? And so the restaurant was closed down, and what they actually decided to do, which enabled them to keep their entire staff and relations with customers, is, like you mentioned, they pivoted their model to actually selling the high-end meat directly to customers. I just thought that was so innovative, and it completely kept them in business. In fact, their business is thriving. And I just love hearing stories like this, and then hearing about, technology platforms like OpenTable that help enable the customer as their needs change to continue staying connected to their customers and keep commerce going. It's really awesome.
Yeah, it's been really inspiring just to see the innovation that's gone into this industry. Because obviously a lot of industries most industries have been very racked by this, but like the restaurant and service industry was just affected so early, so quickly, with millions of service workers out of work. Like it's been really cool to see what people are doing, even like stuff like that, and then giving proceeds to out of work employees. So really inspiring to see.
Yeah, and I think it's really fascinating on that grocery point as well, because it's so different from your standard target kind of like B2B customer. Did you find that they naturally kind of like found out about that offering, or did you?
Oh, I just lost.
Probably did you guys have to promote that? Like, how did they find out about that? You obviously saw the need with the data from the State of the Union, and State of the industry.
Yeah. So one thing, we have a pretty robust sales force. So we have people all over the country that are actually, working day in, day out with restaurants. And so they actually, with no new restaurant signing on, they actually had some time to focus on this. So we actually put our sales team to work on this. And then we put out press releases and did some marketing. So it was kind of a mix of inbound and outbound sales for it. But yeah, because it was a free service as well, the sales process was really just seeing who needed it versus a hard sell of trying to get somebody to sign up for this.
Interesting. So now that, you have a whole new customer segment, grocery stores and wineries and different businesses using the platform for different reasons, how are you thinking about kind of this new customer in the future? And what are you guys doing to serve them?
Yeah. So I talked about the new product line. So obviously the reserving time for grocery stores. And this is something we're continuing to support. And, we're definitely seeing as things open up, like there won't be as much of a need, hopefully, for people reserving grocery times. But takeout and delivery, I'd say, is the other big focus that we've had, as I mentioned. And this, I think, is something that we're definitely going to continue seeing. So I know when you were talking about the stages, like one of them is the new normal. And when we think about the new normal, like I almost think about it as where we are now and also the opening up phase. There's like a few things we have to think about with our customers. So one is, restaurants are starting to open. Like I'm seeing outdoor dining in Chicago. I know in Texas and other places, like things are fully or almost fully back. But restaurants are still going to need support. So even if a restaurant's able to open, it doesn't necessarily mean they will be okay 3 months, 6 months from now. There's restrictions of how many people can be in the restaurant. There's just the whole diner like safety and concern and people not dining out as much. Yeah. So one of the things we really are focused on is one is like, how can we help make it as easy as possible? So we've actually waived all of our fees for restaurants until the end of the year, so that it just makes it a little bit easier for them to come back online. And, the other part of this is I think reservations are almost going to be essential. So, pre-planning, it's going to be more of a thing than ever before. Like it's much harder now to just be like, I'm going to go walk into a restaurant. Like you actually need a reservation. So a lot of restaurants that weren't taking reservations need to take reservations. But obviously that's like a whole, new expense and technology for them. So like offering our service for free until the end of the year is an easy way to help like some of these people that are transitioning to reservations get on. And you alluded to it briefly. We're also seeing reservations being essential for things beyond dining. So I think where we really want to focus is we want to help people experience anything in the food and drink world. And so we've started pivoting our core product to also work for bars, like just say, reserving a spot at a bar to get a drink, maybe even places that don't serve food, and also reservations for wineries. So, as these are establishments that may have not had reservations in the past, and again, are doing it for the first time. So onboarding them onto our system, helping them get up to speed and understand like turn times and how long to set, the books for people to come in, is another big focus.
And I think before we move on to the next point, I think that is such an important thing to think about for everyone who is listening today. when you're thinking about your customers, think about how their needs have changed and how they're going to want and need to do business with you in the future. And I think this is really, getting ahead of it with, especially with restaurants, and anticipating something like a bar, that people are probably going to want reservations because they're going to want to know that it's socially distanced and safe to go in, which means you can't just like walk by and, jump in, and there's not going to be as much like standing around space. It's probably going to be more sitting at a table, and organized, right? And so that customer's needs and priorities have changed. And here's a great example of how the restaurant industry is shifting to meet that change, and then how a huge technology company like OpenTable is also shifting their business model to support these new customer needs. And that's phenomenal that you guys are giving this away for free, because as we know, restaurants are getting back on their feet, and anything to really help them and help them grow. So that's awesome.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just interesting with COVID, like we were already seeing technology becoming such a part of dining in the restaurant industry. And I think COVID's speeding it up a bit.
Yeah.
People want contactless check-ins and want, potentially contactless payment, stuff like that. So we're trying to really see where we can help with that. Yeah. And just my last point on here is just the continued focus on takeout delivery. So obviously delivery was a huge thing before coronavirus. I think it's become even more so. And then especially like the takeout side of it, restaurants are going to need to continue to focus on this. I think many who didn't do it before will continue to make this a very substantial part of their business, especially as demand might be a little bit slower where people are nervous to dine out. So we see this as a place that we really want to continue to focus and help restaurants connect with diners in any of the ways that they're offering food to people.
And this is such an opportunity. I would think, okay, if I owned a restaurant, I would get really competitive and say, okay, so new market opportunity, everyone wants takeout and delivery. How do I make my food show up as beautiful as it can so that they can unbox it, put it on the table, and have that restaurant experience? And I bet that restaurants who are able to up that quality in the delivery takeout experience will start to get even more loyalty from customers that never did that with them before. I know that that's been something for my husband and I. We've been doing takeout and delivery a ton. I cooked for like the first 2 months and I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
and like the better that in-home experience is when I get that food and put it on the table, I want to order from that restaurant again. So that's a new market opportunity for restaurants to really capitalize on.
Totally. Yeah. And it's totally to your point. Like, I think there's such an elevated option now for at-home dining, whereas like, before I have all my staples that I still get that, it's just, I eat it out of the carton or whatever it is that I get. But there's now all these ones where, yes, you do plate it. Like I set a candle on my table or something and try to make it feel a bit more special. Totally. Especially the last 3 or 4 months where I have not been able to go to a restaurant.
Yes. And I love dining in restaurants, like one of my favorite things.
Yes,
but yeah, there's that new market opportunity that's emerged. So it's fun to look at that. Well, Anna, thank you so much. We're going to jump into a discussion with Kiara from Ancestry now. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, so Kiara, Ancestry is a really unique business, right? If you think about businesses, I feel like COVID-19 has been kind of feast or famine, and that some businesses are affected negative 90%, some are up 300%, and they're getting a lot of like marginal customers, people that are very different than maybe they usually would get. And Ancestry is unique also in that you have this kind of like family history product, but also you have this DNA product. And I'd love to hear a little bit more around how Ancestry consumer behaviors have shifted, and maybe even how the consumers have shifted as you look at the last few months.
Yes, sure. I'm happy to share a little perspective on our customer and what we're seeing overall at Ancestry. So I think, here the rise in hobbies is very, very true, whether that's, consuming expanded amounts of content and subscribing to every streaming platform, or exploring, puzzles and gardening in new ways. Family history and sort of that journey of discovery is very much a hobby, and it is a joy to the majority of our consumers, and the time in which they want to spend and actually do that. This has provided them the opportunity to have much more time to actually engage in something that what we're starting to hear from them is, they've wanted to, and now that they're taking advantage of the time to actually get started. Going a little deeper into that, it's been a really key time for us to actually understand who is the customer that's coming in right now, because they do look different. And so we've deployed a number of different surveys, and we're looking much deeper into, engagement levels in every facet, whether that's in our marketing or in the product experience and usage, to understand who are they and what are those motivations. One of the key things is around that urgency we're hearing over and over again. Is like, now that I have the time, I've been meaning to do this. I've been wanting to do this. Like, now is the time. So it's created this urgency that we have the opportunity to take advantage of. And we definitely are. The other thing that I think is important, as we've been really understanding those behaviors and what's shifting, is not only is it the time availability that COVID has created, right, for hobbies to create the space to explore different ones than you might have already been doing. It's also having a different effect on actually the family connection, right? So children are at home, parents are spending more time with their children. They're also spending more time connecting virtually to their family, right? Longer happy hours with friends virtually. And so this idea of family connection and introspection has also been created by COVID that we are seeing more and more. And then when we also think about DNA and health, I think the other key thing is, in no greater time has community health awareness been top of mind, right? We are tracking, we have been, whether it's the New York Times or other outlets, we are tracking what is happening in our global health system, right? The data that we are gathering, how our frontline healthcare workers are handling, certain situations and the needs of all of those communities. And so when you think about just this overwhelming categorical awareness that has also, come forth, it creates a different opportunity, but it also creates an opening to consideration that, we can market our way to that point, but we could also leverage the opportunity right now that has been created from that. And that's definitely our mindset and how we're thinking about it. And just seeing consumers interested in considering things that they haven't previously before. And then, just lastly, most tactically, from a marketing perspective, it's really looking at, media consumption habits, right? As we look at the exchanges where there's extra inventory, where advertisers have pulled out of marketplaces, right? It creates opportunities for efficiencies where you can come in. It creates opportunities to tailor our, bid strategies or advertising similarly to messaging, just to really follow that. If you were a heavy local audio advertiser, right, there's the time spending with that channel is now significantly reduced, right? How do you actually take that investment and move it into other places where consumer habits are shifting, such as in streaming or in social? So we're also looking at how consumers are utilizing the media channels that we activate in now, which are also pretty different.
Two interesting points there. A lot of businesses have pulled out of advertising. And so there is, you're right, a massive opportunity to actually get back in the game and start advertising, because you'll be able to eat up more of the market share. I love that. And the second thing, on the family connectivity, my dad actually started an Ancestry genealogy account during COVID-19. And he just had last night like a Zoom call with all his brothers and sisters. And they're all now in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it was so fun. I listened in, and they're starting to record these, and then he's matching it with Ancestry. And I think that is so interesting how this has created these new opportunities for families to come together and then use platforms like Ancestry to really connect their story and like get this written down for generations to come, which is awesome. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's fascinating too. I'd love to understand, Kiara, like you mentioned, different customer composition, things like that. Like, how can you really shift messaging that easily when you've got like TV ads and things like that that can take months to get into market?
Yes, no, it's a really great question. It's funny. I've just as I'm consuming more and different content and everything that's going on right now, I'm actually kind of a student of marketing, as we all are, and we're looking at how advertisers are actually, the agility that they have by going into the archives of creative that they created 2-3 years ago that now feel super relevant, and how we tailor it and adapt. Seeing how content right now in the entertainment landscape has been changing, right? When we talk about all of my shoots and productions for shows have been stopped, right? Like, how do we create content in this landscape? And I think it's been the birth of amazing innovation, both from, using archive footage, relying on, stock imagery, I think, interspacing individual recorded content. So I think there's amazing agile tactics that are being done on the actual creation of creative and content. But from a messaging perspective, I think there's many ways that you can, shape a perception or a brand of a product in consideration, right? You can choose many different levers to do that, whether it's functional things like how this will improve X, Y, and Z, or emotional around like answering a need state, right? So you need, dinner on the table, right? That, we can service that need, or spare you time, right? There's a range of marketing language that you can leverage. And for us, it's been really around, okay, looking with the introspection time is the key. And so we've shifted a lot of our messaging out of kind of really functional, like it's easy to do, the fun and joy, to much more of the emotional connectivity, like spend this time engaging, find the stories of perseverance, right? A lot of that language and messaging seems to be really resonating. And so we've been really shifting, and we've always had those in our ecosystem. It's just how we're choosing to deploy and concentrate those messages in particular.
That's fascinating. That's great. So you were actually able to repurpose a lot of prior messages that might have been secondary or smaller target audiences, and they're not your primary. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, for this period of time, but it's also looking at it kind of holistically as an ecosystem, and each channel is different, right? So what might be our TV message and our hero that drives consideration is very different than the message that we're going to have on Facebook, or the message we might be pushing out in our content marketing strategy. So it's really tailoring that at every stage of the consumer journey.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. Yeah, so there's like that messaging angle, but that's like one little slice. I'd imagine ancestries have to adapt in many other ways. I'd love to understand, like, when you think about the new consumer and their different behavior, what other things have you changed?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I feel like there was a period where we actually didn't change anything. We were like, we need to see what stabilizes, what becomes the longer consumer trend and behavior versus what is just short-term reaction. And so unlike a lot of advertisers at the time that were kind of really reacting and pulling and adjusting and changing a lot of things, we actually were really focused on watching the consumer behavior and see what started to normalize. And so that afforded us the ability to have a little bit of a longer view on this and to really understand the consumer mindset and how we wanted to shift with that and to find those new opportunities. So that's the first, was really this idea of like, it's not about returning to normal and then just like, bracing for impact. It's actually, let's reset and think about what are all the things that have now changed, i.e. the consumer consciousness is higher on health than it ever was. The consumer connection with their family is higher than it ever has been, right? So from a strategic guidance perspective, that's been a key part of the leadership conversations we've been having. I think when we really were focusing on like platforms, like what are we doing within each platform? So there have been pivots that we've made there, whether that's, understanding the rise of desktop usage from mobile. How do we want to tailor messaging and, our CPA allowances as a result of that to maximize where people are going and how they use our product, all the way through to leaning into Facebook Lives, right? And that's been a key thing around education, utilization of our product. If new people coming in, they're going to need more support on how do they navigate this, right? They've never done it before. And so we've been really heavying up on free access opportunities from educational resources, equally as we've been doing, leveraging all of our experts and customer service teams to really help with Facebook Lives and education globally. So that's been a key pivot that we've made within the platform. And then the last thing I would also really focus on is, as you said, from the new customer that we're getting in and how different they might look. It's also really going to be important for us to retain them. Right. And so we know that they've come in and we're so excited that they've, tried and are dabbling and trialing on our products and having the discoveries they are, but how do we continue that relationship? Now that you've had your first relationship with Ancestry, we really need to focus on how do we maintain that with you so that you're continually experiencing the joy that we can give. So that's definitely been a huge focus of us is, okay, got a flood. Now let's retain them. How do we do that? Whether that's CRM or whether that's more remarketing strategies or re-engagement campaigns as opposed to just acquisition. It's about finding that new balance now.
Gotcha. And how much of that is like, hey, let's partner with our product and engineering teams, knowing that, we might need to change how our service works for 12, 18 plus months to engage this new audience?
Yeah, I think, and for many tech companies, I think there's always if you build it, they will come, or it's they've come, now build it. And so how do you align those and how do you move as fast to achieve that as possible? we definitely have conversations, about that, and we're actively, moving things up in our development cycle as quickly as possible. There's a lot of different features that we had on the roadmap that we have definitely moved forward and escalated as a result of this, which is great. And that's what we should be happening. We should, as a company, and most should be kind of taking the opportunities that are presented and really maximizing them, which our engineering team is definitely doing.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, fantastic. So we are going to be moving on to a conversation with Britt in regards to Guru. And Britt, I'm so excited to speak with you. We've kind of covered the B2C shift in the customer from their needs changing to then their behaviors changing. And now we're thinking about the B2B changes and how use cases have shifted for customers and for businesses like Guru and like Boostability who service other businesses. How have you observed different use cases emerge during COVID-19, and what have you guys done to meet those new needs?
It's a great question, because I think for us at Guru, the core use case actually didn't change that much for us and how our customers wanted to actually utilize the knowledge management platform. What really changed was the use case for our customers and how they adapted. And our job really to support them was to predict both their needs and to listen to their needs through that process. And also, I think when you think about a knowledge management system like Guru, the priority and urgency for adopting a solution like that, as well as the types of content that they put into it, would change pretty substantially as well. And that pivot became pretty obvious.
And how do businesses use Guru?
Yeah, so currently they use it in a couple of ways, but it's really tailored towards helping support the customer-facing roles, so sales and support roles, okay, where not only are they using it for a repository of all the critical information to manage and run their business and share knowledge throughout all of the different employees in the organization, but also thinking about how do we actually deliver that information to all of your employees wherever they are and when they may need it. So think like Chrome extensions to deliver knowledge to a user based on if they're in Gmail or in other platforms, as well as in Slack and in future integrations as well. So really using it to answer questions as they come up and provide the most relevant and verified sources of information. I think one of the interesting things that Anna also mentioned is that customers needed information, like right in this initial period. They definitely needed to understand what was going on and how do they adapt to it. And so Guru in particular created a series of public cards, we call them, but essentially public sources of information around critical resources around COVID for our customers in particular. And that's really how they can navigate and adapt to this period of COVID and best practices to help support them through that transition. And most notably, Guru customers actually created about 2,000 cards around COVID in particular in the first 2 months. And so it was obvious through that stat alone that the nearly overnight global shift in companies' operations to being distributed or being remote was going to really surface this necessity that data being up to date and information being up to date and accessible was super critical. So some examples that I think are really stand out here that showcase that our customers' use cases were changing were the ones listed here. So for instance, like Uber had an immediate need to shift in this world to how they're creating safe transportation and making sure that every one of their customer support teams had that knowledge, understand how best practices were changing, understanding how those regulations were changing. As well, like Shopify has to support 2,000 remote support agents through an insurgence of utilization in their platforms, particularly as many brick and mortar stores had to move to e-commerce in order to accommodate the change.
Yeah, and it was like the biggest growth in migration to e-commerce that we've ever seen.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah. And that fares well for the delivery world as well as like the curbside pickup and everything had to change essentially overnight. Right. And how do you ensure that the people who are responsible for supporting the customers or delivering that information to customers or managing the internal processes has that most up-to-date information and has the most relevant verified content versus working off of things that could potentially be either incorrect or out of date. And mind you, all of this has to be done with distributed and remote workforces versus everyone kind of sitting in an office and being able to permeate that information by proximity. So companies are going through changes with their employees and with how they had to support their customers too.
And this is such a good lesson for, businesses listening in, is that now your customers' needs, what they need from you more than anything is like access to information, and the right information at the right time. And I think that's such a good takeaway and such a good opportunity that, businesses can think about, like, not only are you reopening your brick and mortar and you're focusing on safe commerce, but it's so important and equally important to communicate information about that to your customers at the right time through the right channels. Also, like Kiara was mentioning, like leveraging your channels correctly.
Yeah. And you see a shift in the way that employees are trying to communicate with each other to share this information. And so companies are using things like Zoom and Slack more than ever as messaging platforms. But how do you make sure that you are consolidating how much noise happens in those different communication channels, and also making sure that that information isn't necessarily fatiguing an individual person in the organization, aka like tapping on the virtual shoulder of your subject matter experts or the people who you believe may have that information, and making sure that it's being surfaced proactively to anyone who needs to have access to it. So for instance, like Yext has 12 global offices and a complicated product, and to that end, like they probably experience countless virtual shoulder taps to ask about how things work and how do you manage for this. And so making sure that you could have access to that information that's up to date and in Slack or elsewhere is something that becomes super, super critical as well.
And Guru can surface that information from the company's wiki in a channel like Slack, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm going to look at that for boostability.
Amazing.
You just migrated to Slack right before COVID hit, thank goodness. And it has just been a dream come true. I love the virtual tap on the shoulder. I never thought of it like that, but I'm doing that with my team all day. Yeah. Like, hey, when's this project due? Like, what's the status? It's so great.
Yeah, totally. And the great thing is that, like the more that you can minimize those, obviously it also imparts knowledge on the user who's asking the question versus just feeling like they can go and tap on it. But
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, so we chatted about a little bit of this on the last slide as well, but I think like as we're thinking about you no longer having that luxury of the drive-by conversation that you've had in offices, it's, it's a prevalent problem in organizations. Like something like 62% of teams say that frequent product changes and technical details make it hard to stay knowledgeable. And so you don't have the luxury of driving by and asking those questions, and you don't necessarily know if information is up to date. That process can create a huge amount of inefficiencies in operations, which has only become exacerbated by this move to being fully distributed and remote. And then also, as they're relying more on these different tools that are being proliferated in order to help accommodate communication having to be fully remote, and it's creating an incredible amount of potential redundancy and inefficiency in where you go to access it. And so 82% of leaders say that they have to operate in 5 or more sources of knowledge during the average day in order to get information. And that just because it has a huge amount of context switching costs attached to it. And finally, when you think about all the people using this information and teams using this information, whether it be sales, support, or other teams, there's this also pretty substantiated risk of knowledge silos. And so it's hard to tell where to go for this information, but also if it's up to date. And that all can lead to your operations becoming just a much slower or much less efficient kind of force in an organization.
This is such a good thing for businesses to think about, businesses of all sizes, to create, whether you use a technology like Guru or not, your own kind of like internal wiki knowledge system, that so everyone can have the right information, at the right time that's up to date. And I think a lot of people don't always think about that unless you're like a huge organization, you have these massive sales teams and customer service teams. But if you're a small business, a single proprietor or with 5 employees, I mean, this is great for everyone. So that's another great takeaway people can take from this, is really leveraging knowledge management for their company. And that kind of leads us into the next question, where we're looking at like, how do you see knowledge management and communication changing in the future for businesses? And you guys have some data on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious alone just simply by the chart, and we've all seen the headlines, but there was this massive overnight shift to working from home, and companies trying to identify how they shift to accommodate that. And so you're seeing that here in this chart from just a Google interest and search for WFH working from home over time.
Wow.
But you see kind of all of the different organizations leaning into either a more flexible standard around it or a longer term plan around how they're going to be accommodating work from home. So it was originally predicted that remote work would become the new norm and increase by essentially 30% by 2030. We saw a mass acceleration in that, and it's likely that we'll hit that far before, I would assume, what was originally projected. And you see the headlines of organizations extending their work from home. And I think one of the other really interesting things, there was a study by Box that showed that people are actually doing their work outside of standard work hours as well. So as we're thinking about what working from home means for people, there may be interruptions in their day. They may choose to take split shifts. They're thinking about how to juggle, particularly in the world of businesses that they historically relied on, like daycare being shut down. They have to adjust their working schedule to accommodate it. And so knowing all of that, there's this massive shift from work being synchronous, meaning we all go into an office and we work from 9 to 5 and then we leave, to being asynchronous and having to be able to say, I don't necessarily need to have Mark on the other end of Slack to be able to answer this question for me in order for me to get my job done well, as much as I like slacking you, Mark. But that really is like a massive shift that has been accelerated, but is likely something that we're going to continue to have to lean into, how we support that type of methodology. And the interesting thing about that is one of the things that like I'm pretty confident in, and I think has become even more obvious, is that the ability to thrive through that transition will be a competitive differentiator in organizations. Like it's no longer a like nice to have, we need to be able to figure out how to accommodate this. It's going to actually predict whether or not companies will accelerate through this period or have guardrails around the growth and the efficiency of their operations, kind of all of those core activities. So the tie between effective remote practices and knowledge management and business performance will become even more pronounced through this period and moving forward. And I think like the last thing that I'd highlight here is like the risk of not doing it well is also very much so something that is there. Like without the appropriate guardrails, these virtual shoulder taps or the knowledge silos will cause challenges in your organization that will only continue to potentially degrade or create risk in the performance of your business.
These are such good, advice tips for companies, like even just the concept of the changing business hours for the employee, or, if you're a restaurant and you can only fit like now half of the amount of people used to be able to sit down during a shift, like maybe you need to extend your hours longer so that you can hit all those tables you would have seated. But you just have to open up more hours, which is changing the people's time that they work. And that's interesting. I think there's also like a competitive edge. Britt, like you mentioned, like when people are thinking about hiring, right, and growing, this is going to be something that you can market to people about, different flex hours and an opportunity to stay connected. And then also I love the knowledge silos. Like businesses need to think about that. Where do you have knowledge silos? Where can you fix that? How can you fix it? And what channels can you leverage to, empower your employees to have the right information to conduct business and help your customers? I think that's really cool. And that kind of takes us into the second part of this. Talk to us more about knowledge management here. You really sparked my interest with the knowledge silos concept. I love that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this is really just a natural tie to what we've been chatting about, where when appropriately done, it really enables more knowledge sharing, some flexibility, and then also that verification. So one of the interesting things that we really lean into is that stale information and information that's potentially outdated can do just as much damage as no information at all. And so knowing that information is verified, which we actually have the subject matter experts in the organization do periodic verification on these cards, as we call them, to make sure that they are relevant and up to date, is something that can increase everyone's confidence and trust in the information that they're being served, and as a byproduct, reduce any sort of inefficiency in that kind of self-verification process. Like, I read this information, is this still accurate? No longer needs to be a point of contention. The other thing that's really interesting is that I think through this process, companies are going to have more of a commitment to understanding what their crisis management or dynamic response management will look like. Because I think this has been a moment where every single organization had to figure out how they were going to adapt overnight to this change. And so understanding how they have infrastructure and plans in place to accommodate that will become increasingly more critical and important, and something that people factor in proactively. Also, it minimizes any sort of redundancies and repetitive queries. So like in that knowledge silo, you obviously have a huge risk of having redundant information across them. And so making sure that you can have a shared central source of truth. And so you know necessarily not only where to go to, but that it's also, again, accurate. And then finally, the most important thing here is meeting you where you are and reducing the time that it takes you to actually find that. There was a study by the American Psychological Association that said context switching alone can cost someone up to 40% of their productive time. And if you think about that in aggregate across an organization, especially as everyone's remote, like that's a huge risk. And so when it meets you where you are, you're going to have a huge amount more opportunity to reduce that inefficiency in context switching. We're always going to have a bit of it, but it'll definitely help reduce it. So, and this is one piece of like a much larger puzzle of like, how do you create processes and operations that will help support and encourage the most efficient kind of remote work environment. So how you run your meetings, how you access information, how you respect communication best practices, like this all kind of ties together to have a more sustainable approach.
Awesome. Well, Britt, thank you so much. That was fascinating. We're now going to jump into a topic discussion led by Mark. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, so I think, what I love is that we've seen how the COVID customer mindset can be very different. We're seeing a lot of behavior shifts. Some are temporary, some potentially permanent. And a lot of local businesses have like completely upended their business models and their offerings to be relevant during these times. I think the challenge is like a lot of this is driving what we might call like a marginal customer or a different kind of COVID mindset customer who wouldn't normally necessarily be a fit for your business. So I kind of wonder, kind of begs the question, like, how do we balance those objectives? And what I saw is, okay, Kiara and Ancestry.com have partnered with product and engineering to say like, hey, long-term, can we lean into these things because they're probably good anyway? Let's tweak our messaging and media mix a little bit. Britt, I think I'm seeing you really lean into a product that's kind of perfectly suited for a COVID environment, which is great. But Anna, what was really interesting to me, and I'd like to direct this question at Anna, is, you've done some really wonderful things for your core customers, those restaurant businesses that really need you to be there for them right now. But you've also done something that's pretty unique in enabling non-restaurant businesses like grocery reservations and things like that. And, it kind of begs the question, like, yes, that might be the right thing for society, but do you expect those customers to drive value longer term? Might there be value from this kind of like completely new segment in other ways? And how do you think about that new customer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think, obviously, as you mentioned, for grocery stores, it was a need that we really saw like in the moment. And it is adjacent to what we do. Like we want to be able to enable experiences for anything food and dining. And I think grocery shopping is obviously part of that. Like, will that sustain over time? Like, honestly, I hope it doesn't. Like, I hope we don't live in a world in, a year from now where you still need a reservation for the grocery store. But, many of those grocery partners are either, restaurants that we're doing markets that could easily be partners on our platform, or work with those restaurants. So it actually, I think is a great place for us to have invested in and will still benefit long-term. And it's something that if we do need to continue to do this, or, hope it doesn't happen, but if things go back into shelter in place, like we have the capability now to do this, and we can do it beyond even grocery stores. Like if there is a need for other types of services to take reservations, like we've now adapted our product to be super flexible for like any type of business. Bars and wineries, I think that'll continue longer term. Again, time will tell, but wineries especially, like it makes sense to have a reservation. Many wineries already did this. And so it's just one more option for when you're planning what you want to do around dining and drinking and things on the weekend or during the week. Like, you can turn to OpenTable for any of that.
That's actually really fascinating. It's kind of like, this crisis is to present an opportunity for OpenTable to do kind of like product market fit testing across a variety of different categories, some of which might persist. And I think can apply to a lot of businesses in ways where they're thinking like, hey, is this delivery box idea that, Amanda referenced early, is that something that we should keep doing? Because there is always going to be some customer that is a busy family and can't make it out. So that's fascinating. Britt, I'm going to give you the lightning round question. And I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball because I don't think anyone really knows. But your company's benefiting from a lot of short-term changes right now. And I think, some of these things will persist. Like, I'm probably going to continue to work from home a little bit more than I used to, even after COVID, because I've now, figured out how to do that effectively. But others probably won't. Like, I'm really looking forward to dining in a restaurant. Like, when you look at your business, how do you think about what changes you think are like truly short term and therefore you shouldn't lean into too much versus the behaviors that might sustain over time?
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question, because whether or not organizations choose to institute an entirely or partially remote team on a longer term basis or go back as quickly as they can, the byproduct of this accelerated shift is the exposure and the uncovered opportunity for efficient information sharing and efficient best practices and collaboration. And then I think also that emphasis on adaptability is going to be super critical. And so all the systems that we use to support this trend, whether it's the diversification of them, adoption of new tools, all of that, I think in many cases will continue to stay. And so when we're thinking about product marketing or other investments, when we're thinking about like the near and the long-term future that's not able to be predicted, I often think of it on a spectrum of if we were to stay in a world where everyone continued to be remote for the next 12 to 24 months, how would this feature or this strategy or this approach actually add value, and how much value would it add? And then take that same question and look at it on the other end to say, like, if we were to go back to normal, what would the impact be and the value derived from it? And we can't predict, but knowing that it fits both of the scenarios will create defensibility around the investment. And then I often look at that in tandem with like, what's the period to impact? So how much will it take us to get the strategy out the door, and how long will it take us to potentially get payback on that strategy? And then all of that, I think, is also under the guise or the lens of like, this is probably a best practice that we're encouraging, or this is probably a feature that we would encourage folks to lean into anyway. And so the future of work is pretty malleable right now, and can we help actually shape it too moving forward? And so it's a bit of kind of a matrix that we'll assess it on, but I think it's just understanding that it could work in most cases.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of framing it up. I think when people are in this like defensive mode and they're just trying to rapidly adapt, they don't necessarily think about, am I adapting to something that I would actually be valuable to my customers in a post-COVID world or not? And I think it's a really excellent lens to kind of like rethink and reprioritize, because a lot of people probably already had ideas on their lists that they never had the opportunity to think about. So thank you so much for that.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. Now we're going to dive into our actionable SEO strategies. Today's topic is how to grow your SEO by interacting with new and returning customers. And we have Colton Miller, our Director of SEO. Colton, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And Mike Marsh, our SEO Manager. Mike, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me again, Amanda.
Awesome. All right, guys, over to you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Kiara, Britt, Anna, Mark. Great information. And what we wanted to do is we kind of wanted to tie a lot of the things that you guys have been talking about into specific things that could be leveraged for SEO, or how you could potentially grow your SEO through a lot of these things. So I love that Britt mentioned a whole lot about knowledge bases and about specifically Guru's product, because that's something that we want to talk about with our SMB clients and with other clients that potentially want to look at these different tools and what they can do to utilize them for an SEO purpose. The first one that we have here is the industry wiki, where if you're creating, and we've talked about these in past search sessions, where you're creating these tools and then you're leveraging it specifically for SEO. So the difference between a wiki and a knowledge base would potentially be, a wiki would be like telling a story. You have a wiki for your area and service, and so it's like a more robust about us page, but you have where you're describing the special needs that you provide for. You're providing the considerations. You're just providing a lot of that content that potentially answers questions as to why a customer would come to your site, and you have that available so you can answer those questions, potentially rank for a featured snippet, or in this specific instance, a local term where you're providing those local cities, those locations, that area, and the services that you provide. So Google can then better represent you in their SERPs. And then for the knowledge base, what you're providing is you're providing a lot of product information on details, specifically tips and tricks. You're maybe describing vocabulary. You have a glossary on your page. And so you're getting into the nitty gritty. It's not so much of a story as a wiki would be, but you're getting into the technicalities where you're really showing the customer and you're showing Google that you're a professional and that you have that information. And so if you have that information available on your site, you then have the possibility of actually ranking for it and for all of those terms. So make sure that as you're going through those things, that's something that you can leverage and you can really promote in different avenues, so you can potentially rank for those specific terms. And I'll turn it over to Colton.
Yep. And then, of course, expanding past that, you have, again, we've also talked about this in past search sessions, but tutorials, videos, text, can be kind of open-ended there. Doesn't even have to be anything super complex, but just kind of go through some of your services, maybe break it down for somebody. This is a great way to get kind of general traffic to your site, increase the usability within your site, get general rankings, different things like that. This is great content for a blog. If you've been kind of curious as to how you want to fill that content out, this is a great way to do it. If you've been curious, how you want to get into YouTube, this is a great way. If you've not been sure how you want to start a TikTok channel, this is a great way. So there's all sorts of different ways, but tutorial series, fantastic way to do it. Obviously, you can transcribe it. You can get all sorts of content out of it. The one after this one, I think everybody, has probably seen this, but apps are probably the most prolific way we see this. Some sort of reward program, right? Whether it's on purchases, maybe it's on a service. One of my favorite ways of doing this is actually through tenure, right? Give somebody a membership, and then if they're there with you through like 4 years, give them some benefits, right? Maybe it's a discount, a permanent discount going forward. Maybe it's some, maybe it's a reward. Maybe it's some sort of, keychain. Who knows, right? But, there's different ways that you can do that. Incentivize people to come back to your service. Incentivize some way for them to kind of repurchase. There's all sorts of different ways. And obviously, if you're making an app, if you're making other content channels for your business, that's different things that you're going to leverage kind of SEO wise and leverage specifically for search engines to crawl and obviously potentially get your ranks for. This last one is actually kind of a favorite that I found kind of most recently. It's actually VIP events. Most recently, I actually discovered this with my real estate company. So specifically, you have a real estate company, right? Or anybody realistically, but essentially throw on like an event. It doesn't even have to be in real life, right? It could be on Zoom or Slack or something like that, but essentially give out prizes, do something like that, do something fun and interactive. It allows you a chance to essentially kind of get involved with your community and your past customers. Also, you can invite, have them invite their friends and family. So you potentially get some referrals there as well. And then again, you can kind of either hand out maybe some new information with your business. You could potentially get some more social interaction. You could potentially get some pictures and whatnot of your customer base. Again, it's all more, producing more content for your website, for your business, and essentially just expanding your rankings and your content and your influence online. So bunch of different ways that you can kind of uncommonly grow your business and grow your search engine presence online.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, now we're going to jump into a quick Q&A. I know we've answered a lot of questions already. Huge thank you to all of our panelists and everyone who's joined today. We have Christine Pratt, our show producer and head of content, here to take us through any questions the audience might have.
Hey, thanks, Amanda. We've had several questions that have come in that have kind of been answered as we've been going, but I do have a couple specific ones. One I'm going to direct first to Kiara, and then anyone else, if you have other thoughts to weigh in. You talked very specifically about a lot of different platforms and how Ancestry has had to adapt your messaging on all of these different ones. And I'm assuming just because people are having more time, you're getting more people of all kinds of generations on Ancestry. How are we kind of seeing people adapt to new technology and the acceleration of technology because of the pandemic?
Yes, so we are. I mean, the first part of that question is the who's coming and sort of the whether it's demographic or multi-generational lens on that. And we're absolutely seeing significant shifts as far as younger consumers coming in and exploring within our product. Which is awesome because the things and the needs that they have within the product are different. And we're also seeing that manifest in how we've actually built the product and the features that we have as well. And so, which is both from a kind of platform, but also in a feature set, right? Within our ecosystem, who's using what for which reasons. So that's probably the most significant thing that we are seeing. And I think the other part is the expectations of the product from a multi-generational perspective are also different. So the new people that are coming in and dabbling that are looking are much more around, hey, what does this thing do? Like, can you show me what it does? And a little bit more from a lean back perspective, just as some of the kind of more our diehard users are there and engaging it in way more. They are leaning in. They are going into all aspects of it, reviewing all of the content, looking at, researching things in deeper ways. And then the other two nuances that we're seeing, which is potentially a little bit more on the marketing side, is things, for example, around like military records or family tree building, really, really big. We're seeing with our core and potentially older demographics. Some of the younger demographics we're actually seeing shifting into a couple of the content opportunities that we've had that we launched, for example, for like voting equality and women's right to vote is a kind of broader topic. And we have a content experience that we've designed around that we see also pulling in different younger audiences. So we are seeing them, but they're utilizing the platform in very different ways. And so for us, it's to learn why they're doing that so we can better enable that experience.
Great. Britt and Anna, do you have any other thoughts about kind of the changing technology because of the pandemic and how people are adapting to it?
I don't have much more to add. I think more just what I talked to earlier about shifting to like delivery, takeout, stuff like that for our customers. But we're just excited right now to start seeing a lot more people coming to our site again, because obviously it was a bit of a lull when reservations were not the primary focus.
Yeah, I think the other thing, it wasn't necessarily a shift in the adoption of our technology, but as you mentioned kind of in my introduction, was previously an education technology startup that focused on high school students. But one of the things that we observed is the places that we could go to find these students and the amount of time that they're spending on certain systems shifted as well. And so that was where we really had to pivot our targeting strategy and our overall acquisition strategy, is meeting our target audiences where they were in the systems that they were utilizing more. So it wasn't necessarily a change for us specifically, but a change in where their time was spent and where we had to go and find them.
Okay, great. Thanks all. Like I mentioned, we had many of our questions that were addressed as we kind of went. For a couple others, I will reach out to you directly to answer your question. But with that, Amanda, I'm going to send it back to you.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. We have phenomenal resources from all of our panelists. Thank you guys so much for being here. Kiara, Britt, Anna, Mark, we are just so grateful to have you here helping share this information with our network of businesses and partners and everyone that we talk to. So thank you. We're going to have all these resources up on our website for people. I believe they're already there right now on our search sessions page, and then we'll be sending out an email tomorrow with the link to the video so you can watch it again or share it with peers, and then get access to all of these resources. So thank you so much, you guys. It's been such a pleasure having you here. And tune in next week. We have a great show next week as well. We're going to be covering social media strategy. We have special guest Laura Cole, VP of Marketing, and Todd Renard, VP of Digital Product Management from Vivial, to talk about social media strategies. We've been getting tons of requests for a social media show and are really excited about this one. We're going to be talking about the top 5 ways to promote your brand on social media during COVID-19. And as always, if you need help with your SEO, Boostability is here to help both SMBs and partners grow. Reach out to us at boostability.com. Give us a call. You can also RSVP or watch this show again at boostability.com/search sessions. Again, thank you to our expert panel. It was such a pleasure having you guys, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.